The first time one of my buses crashed, I thought it was just an accident. But when the prophet and the elder who initiated me called that night and said, "This is the sacrifice the spirits have accepted. Now watch how your company will grow." And it was true. The very next month, I bought 2 more vehicles, and passengers flooded my station like never before. I was a transport operator in Ghana, but what no one knew was that every crash, every life lost on those roads, was blood poured out for my success, all under the direction of a man people respect and call prophet of God.
In this episode, you will hear a confession that will shake you, a testimony from a transport operator who reveals how his business was tied to the blood of innocent passengers, sacrifices demanded by a prophet and an elder through occult initiation. This is not rumor. This is not storybook fiction. This is a real voice, a real life, and a real warning about how dark powers are operating both in the church and in our daily businesses. Stay with us. And before we begin, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this video, because what you are about to hear could open your eyes to the truth hidden in plain sight.
The first time it happened, I didn't believe it. I thought it was just one of those terrible accidents people always talk about on the highways of Ghana. A bus, overloaded, swerving, passengers screaming, and then silence. But deep in my heart, I knew it was something else. You see, I will never forget that night. The night that changed everything. It was a Friday evening, business had been moving slow for weeks, and one of my buses was on the Accra-Kumasi highway. A very busy route. I remember sitting at home, restless, thinking about how much I owed the bank, the drivers complaining about how the business was moving slow. The fuel prices that were climbing like demons chasing fire. My business was hanging on a thread, and my pride as a man was already wounded. Then the call came. "Sir, one of the buses, there's been an accident." At first, my heart just stopped. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I thought of the passengers, of their families, of the young boys and girls I had seen earlier boarding at the station. Some of them laughing, some eating bread and groundnut as they waited. They trusted me with their lives. I rushed out and started making calls, trying to find out the truth. By the time I got to Suam, the police, the fire service, and a crowd of hundreds stood around the twisted wreckage. Flames still licked the sides of the bus, the smell of burning tires mixed with flesh. My own bus, my own company's name written boldly on the side, now a coffin on wheels. I stood there, frozen. People were crying. Mothers screaming the names of their children. Men shaking their fists at the heavens. Someone shouted, "These transport owners don't care about lives, they just care about money." And those words pierced my soul because, deep down, I was already questioning myself. I didn't even cry. I just stood there, numb, listening to the ambulance sirens and the wailing of the living. Later that night, when I was home, I thought it was over. I thought it was just a terrible tragedy. Until my phone rang again. First it was the elder, then the prophet. Their voices calm, steady, like they had been waiting for this moment. All of them said the same thing. "My son, do not mourn. What happened was not an accident. It was your first sacrifice. Heaven has received it. Watch closely, and you will see what this covenant will do for you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mouth went dry. I wanted to hang up, but something in his voice held me. He sounded so certain. So unshaken. For days I tried to deny it. I told myself he was just being spiritual, trying to make sense of a tragedy. But then, the money started coming. Within about 2 months, all my debts cleared. Ticket sales doubled. Contracts I had chased for years suddenly fell on my lap. People were calling me blessed. Even pastors from other churches began inviting me to their programs, calling me a man who carries grace. But when night came, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back on that highway. I could hear the tires screeching, the glass shattering, the screams of passengers as the bus flipped. I could see their faces pressed against the windows, desperate, hopeless. I could smell the blood, the smoke, the burnt flesh. And then I would wake up, drenched in sweat, my heart racing like it would explode. And yet, the next morning, more money. More passengers. More applause. That's when the war inside me began. on the outside, I wore a smile. People saw a successful businessman. They said, God has done it for him. They admired my fleet of buses, now growing faster than I ever imagined. But on the inside, I was dying. The screams of those passengers followed me everywhere, to the office, to the bank, even to church. Sometimes, I would see their faces in the mirror when I washed my face in the morning. And deep down, I knew it wasn't God blessing me. It was blood. Their blood. I even remember one night, I was sitting in my room, counting money. So much money, more than I had ever held before. And then, in the silence, I heard a child's voice whisper, "Daddy, why did you let me die?" I dropped the money and fell on the floor, shaking. My own children were asleep in the next room, but that voice wasn't theirs. It was the voice of one of those little ones who had died in my bus. I could feel it. From that moment, the money became heavier. The buses, the drivers, the blessings, all of it felt like it was drenched in blood. But I didn't stop. I told myself, this is the price of success. And truly, the prophet was right. That crash was the beginning of my rising. But what he didn't tell me was that it was also the beginning of my torment. One night, when the money had begun flowing and my buses were suddenly in demand everywhere, I decided to call the prophet. My voice was shaky, but I had to ask, "Papa, was it really necessary? Did those people really have to die?" He paused for a long moment. Then, in that calm, unshaken voice of his, he said, "My son, don't allow emotions to weaken you. Blood is the price for true power. And if you want to keep rising, more will be required." What happened on the highway was only the beginning. The altar has tasted, and it will demand more. I called the elder again to find out. He also said the same thing just as the prophet had told me. I froze. My throat tightened. The room felt smaller, colder. His words sank deep into my chest like knives. More will be required. I hung up and sat in silence. And for the first time, I began to fear every journey my cars made. Because I knew the road itself had become my altar. That was the day I realized I was no longer just a transport operator. I was a man tied to blood. And the prophet was the mediator between me and the elder. I will say, he was the one holding the rope. Those words never left me. The altar has tasted, and it will demand more. At first, I tried to silence the echo of that warning. I convinced myself that maybe he was just speaking in riddles. But deep down, I knew he meant every word. And it didn't take long for his prophecy to come true. Just 3 months later, another bus. It was raining heavily that night. The road between Cape Coast and Tokorodi was slippery. Somewhere near Elmina, the bus suddenly swerved off the road and crashed into a ditch. The wreck was worse than the first. More than a dozen souls gone in an instant. And just like before I could even gather my thoughts, my phone rang. It was him. "Do not be shaken, my son. The altar is working. Each drop of blood is securing your throne. Soon, no other company will be able to compete with you." My hands trembled as I held the phone. Compete. He was speaking of business while families were crying over coffins. But once again, his words proved true. My rival company in Accra shut down within weeks. New contracts flowed in. Even government officials began using my buses for their campaigns. And yet, the guilt only deepened. I would stand at funerals, pretending to grieve with the families of the dead. I would donate money for burials, stand with my head bowed, even pray with them. But in my heart, I knew the truth. I had become the killer in a prophet's robe. The chain continued. Sometimes it was a bus. Sometimes a smaller vehicle. Sometimes it was just one person, other times a whole family. Every time the numbers grew, so did my company. My fleet doubled. Then tripled. But no one knew the price being paid on the highways. At night, the voices of the dead tormented me. I saw them in my dreams, standing on the side of the road, blood dripping from their clothes, their eyes staring at me with accusation. Sometimes, I would wake up screaming. My wife thought I was stressed from work. She had no idea I was haunted by the very people whose lives were fueling our so-called blessings. And the elder, he became bolder. He told me to stop pretending. He said, "You are chosen for this altar. Don't cry when blood flows. Celebrate it. Because each death is your rising. If the world must lose hundreds for you to gain thousands, that is the way of power." Those words burned into my soul like fire. But I kept obeying. There was one particular night I will never forget. One of my newest luxury small buses had just been launched. It was full of university students traveling from Kumasi back to Accra after a campus program. Another crash. This time, the screams of those young students never left me. I could see their parents wailing on the TV news, holding up photos, begging for answers. The pain in their voices, it crushed me. But when I checked my accounts the next morning, hundreds of thousands of cedis had flowed in from new contracts. Blood for wealth. Death for power. The prophet called once more. "Come, Satan. My son, you are now deep in the covenant. There is no turning back. Each soul that falls is a stone laid on your empire. Do not forget, without the altar, you are nothing." That was when the full horror hit me. I wasn't just running a transport business anymore. I was running a slaughterhouse on wheels. Every engine that roared to life, every ticket sold, was tied to blood. And every time I tried to resist, the prophet's shadow loomed larger, reminding me that it was too late. My family celebrated our wealth. My workers celebrated the growth of the company. The public praised my success. But I knew, behind every boss, there were ghosts. Behind every coin, there was blood. And as the sacrifices continued, I began to wonder, how many more bodies would it take before the altar finally consumed me too?
What you have just listened to is even just the beginning of this confession. The continuation will even shock you. This is not just the confession of a man, it is the revelation of a system. A system where blood is traded for power. Where prophets who claim to serve God are kneeling before altars of darkness. And here is the truth, there is no throne built on blood that will stand before the throne of Christ. From the very beginning, God made it clear, the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make atonement for your souls. Leviticus 17 verse 11. Blood belongs to God. It was never meant to be a currency for men to buy power, fame, or wealth. That price was already paid once and for all by the blood of Jesus Christ. Yet, what do we see today? Men and women calling themselves prophets, apostles, bishops, but behind closed doors, they are making covenants with marine spirits, ancestral gods, and demonic altars. And because the people see miracles, because the churches are full, because the money is flowing, they call it the blessing of God. But the Bible warns us in 2 Corinthians 11 verse 14, and no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. Not every light is holy. Not every miracle is from God. Not every prophet who shouts Jesus belongs to him. My brothers and sisters, hear me well, the devil does not give for free. Every gift from him comes wrapped in death. This story has shown us clearly, the price of false power is always blood, always destruction. It may begin with strangers, with those you do not know. But the altar will not stop until it reaches your own home. And so, the question today is this, whose altar are you standing on? Whose voice are you following? Are you chasing signs, chasing miracles, chasing fame, and ignoring the word of God? Or are you standing on the finished work of Christ, who shed his own blood so no other sacrifice would ever be needed? Beware of altars that are fed by secrecy, manipulation, and fear. For these are not the ways of God. Choose today whose altar you will stand upon. And if you have been blessed, challenged, or stirred by this confession, I ask you, do not keep it to yourself. Share this story. Let others hear it. Let it be a trumpet call in the ears of those who are blindly following wolves in sheep's clothing. This is why we bring you these confessions, not to entertain, but to expose the darkness, and to call you back to the true light, Jesus Christ. So, take this message seriously. Comment, reflect, and share. Most importantly, decide today that your life will not be tied to false prophets or dark altars, but only to Christ, the true and living King.